Putting a color wash or a paint wash over a painted piece of furniture can add so much dimension and change the look drastically. So if you've ever wondered how to do a color wash over a painted piece of furniture, today's video is for you. Just let me get set up and I'll be right back. Let's start. Here's the fun part. Here's the Bombay style chest I started with. I rarely see Bombay-shaped furniture here in the Greater Toronto area, so I was really happy to find this chest selling at my local restore. And I was happy to pay the $60 for it because I like this piece so much. The drawers worked great, and it's a nice, solid, sturdy piece. When I brought it home and put it into my paint room, I took another really good look at it, and there was little scuffs on it. It was a little scratched up, and it had many tiny little holes in the finish, which I think is supposed to mimic wormholes in the wood. But overall, like I said, it's a really nice solid piece that I started with gorgeous shape and details. I started by flipping this piece on its back so I could give it a really good cleaning and see what the undercarriage looked like. And look what I found, a bunch of cobwebs, piece of paper with a bunch of artistic little characters on it, and a French franc. I've never seen a French franc before, so I was pretty amused. I also noticed that this piece was made in China and the body was not real wood. The body was made up of some sort of molded material, maybe resin or something. And if you know what it is, I'd love to hear in the comments down below because I'm actually curious myself. To begin the cleaning process, I brought out my shop vac and vacuumed up all the cobwebs and dust. It took me a good minute to figure out how to remove the drawers, but there was a little plastic tab that was a drawer stopper. So you really had to kind of squeeze your hand in there and press that plastic tab for the drawers to be removed. I gave the underside of the drawers, the inside of the drawers, and everything a thorough vacuuming with the shop vac. And just as a side note, and this is probably common logic, but I have to admit I hate doing it. Cleaning a shop vac on a regular basis is super important. I'm not going to lie, I don't do it. I ask Nick to do it for me because it's one of those jobs that I just dread, but it is very important for your shop vac to work optimally and for you not to have any sort of crud just sitting in there. Make sure it's cleaned out on a regular basis. Now it was time to clean the inside and outside with White Lightning and an automotive sponge. And White Lightning can be replaced with TSP or Mean Green or even vinegar and water if you prefer to go the natural route. There are plenty of good cleaners to use so you can clean your furniture. I would just recommend that whatever cleaner you decide to use, take a sponge and dampen it with clean water and give your furniture a good wipe after you've cleaned it as well, because you don't want any of the cleaning residue remaining on the piece before you sand and prime. And here's a really good clip of what the inside looked like. So again, if any of you know what material this was made out of or molded out of, I would love to hear in the comments down below. And once I had this piece upright, it was time to give the top a really good cleaning as well. I I let the piece dry 100%, and then I went ahead and removed the hardware on both drawers. Then I rolled the piece into my sanding room and started giving it a scuff sanding with a coarse sanding pad. And as you can see here, when you're sanding before paint, and this is not an actual wood piece, I wasn't necessarily going with the grain. It's just a scuff sand any which way, just to get that surface with a little tooth on it, and so it grips onto the primer or paint. Now, you may not want to sand in any willy-nilly direction if you're using a heavy-duty sander, because you run into the possibility of actually leaving some scuff marks before you prime or before you sand, and you don't want to be seeing those through your finish. However, if you're hand sanding, the possibility of creating deep enough scratches or scuff marks is slim to none. So when I'm hand sanding, I think I've mentioned in my other videos, I just kind of go at it like wiping down a kitchen counter. You don't need a whole lot of strength or power behind the hand sanding. So if you just give it a really good light hand sanding, it really doesn't matter whether you go in the direction of a grain or not. My rule of thumb is when I'm working with a real wood piece, I tend to go with the grain regardless of how I'm sanding it. And if I'm going with a factory finish like this one here, it really doesn't make a difference. After I completed the scuff sanding, to remove the dust, I use this dollar store brush. I like using this brush while I'm in the sanding room, but then I roll the piece back into my paint room, and I like to use a tack cloth to make sure that if there's any other dust left on the piece, it gets picked up with the tack cloth. To seal any bleed through and create a surface that the paint will stick to, I brushed on this clear bonding primer, which is called Bonding Boss. This is a newer product from Dixie Belle, and what they've done is combined their Slick Stick with their Boss primer, and hence the Bonding Boss. But this is fabulous. I'm so glad they did, because combining these two products really saves a lot of time. Now, you all know how much I love Bin Shellac Base Primer, or BIN Shellac Base Primer. It's usually my go-to, but this is becoming my new favorite. For one, as I mentioned in prior videos, Bin Shellac Primer is very expensive here in the Greater Toronto Area. It's about $100 a gallon. So cost-wise, this definitely makes more sense, and there is no odor with this Bonding Boss. Whereas when I'm working with the shellac-based product, I do need to open all the windows and make sure there's very good ventilation. When you first open the jar, you will see that it really needs a good mixing because there will be some separation. I gave it a really good mixing with a stir stick, probably for about at least a good 30 seconds to make sure everything was incorporated together. Then using a synthetic brush, I started brushing on this primer. As you can see, it goes on milky, even though it says that it's clear. And this is a huge benefit. I think this is awesome because then you can see exactly where you are brushing or where you may have missed brushing. And then once you have it on, it dries perfectly clear and invisible. This primer has a nice amount of open time to it because as you can see here, I basically just get it on and then I smooth it out afterwards. And if you do have a few areas where you see that it's a little thicker, you can go in and try and smooth that out as well, but it really doesn't make a difference because it's drying clear. So long as you smooth it out as best you can, it levels out really nicely and it will all dry clear anyways. I went ahead and worked my way around this piece and made sure that it was entirely covered in this bonding boss. And here's what it looked like totally covered while it was wet. And here's what it looked like perfectly dried. You can't even tell that there's primer on it. So now for the fun part. I took a synthetic round brush, I misted it with my water mister, and I started painting Aubergine, which is this rich, beautiful purple. I don't work with the color purple very often, but the coverage was phenomenal. One coat and it covered this piece beautifully. I painted right over the studs and I used the tip of my paintbrush to pounce into all those little crevices to make sure that they were 100% covered. If you have any urge, I really encourage you to paint with different colors. I can't tell you how much joy this brings. If I was to just stick with the black, white, beiges, creams, I would get bored very, very quickly. And sometimes I choose colors such as this one that I wouldn't normally work with or that I don't usually gravitate to. But I have to say, every time I choose a color that's out of my comfort zone, I never regret it because I have so much fun painting with color. Once I had the entire piece painted in Aubergine, I let it dry overnight and I came back the next day to create the finish. As I mentioned, the Aubergine had such a great coverage, it only needed one coat, but I also wanted to add some lighter blending. So where I wanted the blending to appear, I applied a second coat in the areas where I wanted to use Secret Path, which is a lighter purple. I added Secret Path to the middle of the drawer panels, and then using a separate larger brush, I fanned it out and feathered it all in for a lovely blended look. Once I had everything painted in purple and my blended technique all dried, I could have stopped there because I thought it looked pretty darn good, but a little too purpley for me. So I ended up mixing up a black paint wash. And my vision was to create an eggplant, a rich, dark eggplant color on this piece. So using a 50-50 mix of caviar chalk paint and water, I created a black wash. Now I apologize, I lost the original clips of the black wash portion, so I'm using the social video clips. They may not be quite as good quality, but I'm hoping that you can see the procedure just as well. Working in sections, I brushed on the black wash, making sure not to miss any areas. While the paint wash is still wet, I used a shop towel to dab off the excess. I actually started wiping it off. I didn't really like that look, so then I started dabbing it. This really darkens the piece up while creating some awesome texture. Once my color wash or paint wash had dried, it was time for the finishing touches. So I used some gold gilding wax and I applied it over the studs and also on the hardware. And just as a reminder, here's the before. And here's the after. And I think it is a lovely, dark, rich eggplant color. And I have to admit, I love the way the gold plays off it. And I cannot wait to hear what you think. So I hope you enjoyed today's Bombay chest makeover. I love the way it turned out, and I think the color wash just brought it up that extra notch. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Hit that like button because it helps a ton. And you can also find me over at salvagedinspirations.com, where I have over 500 furniture painting tutorials teaching you how to make your furniture beautiful. Until next time, have a fabulous week. Bye, guys.